You get in your car and just drive. You stop wherever you want. You drive as long as you want. Nobody's counting your hours behind the wheel. Nobody knows where you were at 3 in the morning last night. Now imagine you didn't have that right at all. That every second behind the wheel, every stop, every mile is recorded by a device wired directly into your dashboard, and that data isn't just seen by your employer, but by a federal agency that can fine you on the spot if you break the schedule by even a few minutes. That's exactly how almost every trucker in America lives. And most people have no idea this device even exists. There are 3 layers to this story. The first explains why this kind of surveillance was introduced in the first place. The second reveals how this technology actually works and what it really tracks. And the third is the part that surprises almost everyone, how a black market for beating this system became its own underground industry, and why many drivers who hated this device at first now say it saved their lives. By the end of this video, you'll never look at a parked truck the same way again. Why they're watched in the first place? Let's start with the obvious question. Why would you even need to monitor adult professionals just doing their job? The answer didn't come from a desire to control, it came from statistics that terrified regulators for years. Before tracking became mandatory, truckers logged their hours by hand, in paper logbooks. Drivers used to call them comic books because you could write whatever you wanted in them. An exhausted driver racing to make a deadline would simply add a few hours of rest that never happened. The result was predictable. Driver fatigue caused thousands of crashes every year, and a heavy truck losing control at highway speed becomes a 40-ton projectile. According to federal transportation data, driver fatigue remains one of the leading causes of large truck crashes, and that's exactly what eventually led to a law that changed the profession forever. The device almost nobody's heard of since 2017. Every commercial truck in the US has been required to carry an electronic device that tracks hours on an electronic logging device. It's a small box wired directly into the engine through a diagnostic port, the same kind of port used to read error codes in a regular car. But this device does far more than just count hours. It records essentially everything. The truck's speed every single second it's moving, hard braking events, the exact start and end time of every trip, GPS coordinates of every stop, and most importantly, how many consecutive hours the engine has been running, which means how many hours the driver has spent behind the wheel without a break. Federal law in the US strictly limits driving time. A maximum of 11 hours behind the wheel after 10 consecutive hours off duty, and no more than a 14-hour total working window per day. And here's where it gets interesting. When the limit is about to run out, the device doesn't just warn the driver. 30 minutes after the limit is exceeded, the truck literally blocks the driver from continuing the trip. Some models physically limit engine acceleration. A driver could be on the highway 5 minutes from the nearest rest stop, and the system already demands he stop right where he is. The fine for violating the hours limit can reach $16,000 per violation. And if an inspector at a weigh station finds a discrepancy in the old data, they can pull the driver off the road immediately, mid-run. The underground market for beating the system, and here's the part almost nobody talks about openly. Since the system is this strict, a whole shadow market for getting around it naturally emerged. There are devices that plug in between the diagnostic port and the old and spoof the engine signal, making the system think the truck is parked when it's actually moving. Drivers call them jammers, and they're sold in private groups and specialized forums for anywhere from a few hundred to a couple $1,000s. According to transportation regulators, thousands of these devices are confiscated at weigh stations across the country every year. Using one is a federal crime, not just an administrative violation, and a driver caught with one can lose their commercial driver's license permanently. You might ask, why take that kind of risk? The answer is simple and a little sad. Many drivers are paid by the mile, not by the hour. Every forced stop the old requires is unpaid downtime. For a driver with a mortgage and a family at home, 30 forced minutes on the highway can sometimes be the difference between making a delivery deadline and losing the contract entirely. The unexpected twist, and here's that third layer that surprises almost everyone outside this industry. Ask a veteran trucker who worked back in the paper logbook era whether he'd want to go back to a time when nobody tracked his hours. Most will say no. The reason is that before ILDS, pressure from dispatchers and employers to keep driving exhausted was practically unlimited. A dispatcher could demand a driver make a deadline, knowing full well the driver would just fudge the rest hours in a paper log. The electronic system physically removed that possibility, and suddenly drivers had a legitimate, unarguable excuse. The system won't let me keep going. It's not him refusing. It's the machine that physically won't allow it. Many drivers describe this as a relief, not a form of control. For the first time in decades, they had a device that was literally on their side in any argument with an employer about overtime. So next time you see a truck quietly pulling into a rest stop exactly when it seems like the driver still had energy to keep going, know that it wasn't the driver who decided to rest. It was a small box under the dashboard that just made that decision for him. And strangely enough, for a lot of drivers, that decision turned out to be less of a cage and more of a lifeline. Now I want to hear from you. If you're a trucker, what do you think about olds? Do they help or hurt? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone. And if you're watching this from your couch, did it surprise you how closely trucks are actually being tracked? If you found this interesting, hit like and subscribe. There's a lot more of these stories coming. See you down the road.